Hi, Wolfpack. Welcome back to Eunoia. We have a special guest today, Anna Childs. Hi, welcome.
Hi, it's so good to be here.
I'm glad to have you. So, we're going to talk about some birth chart and astrology stuff today, probably touch on some chakra topics and just Anna's personal journey. So, we're going to start with a random question pull from my jar here, my little bucket.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh, three came out. Oh, four came out, but we're only going to do
It's like
one.
when you're doing tarot, the cards just shoot out.
Oh my, so the past couple of questions, that's like how they happened, and the person I was interviewing ended up like really loving the question. So we'll see how this works for you.
Okay.
This actually is kind of heavy, so if you want to talk about this later, we can, but it says, how did slash do you face your shadow side?
Ooh, I love that question. So we're each going to answer this, right?
Yes.
I love this question. So I face my shadow side like so wholeheartedly and sometimes even ruthlessly. I think that's what separates me from maybe the traditional kind of like spiritualist of like, oh, everything's rainbows and sunshine. Like, I'm like, no, if there's something holding me back internally or externally in any way, shape, or form, I want to put myself in front of that immediately, you know? And that has been something that I've become better at over the years. But I am just so wholeheartedly dedicated to like shadow work. And I believe that confronting our shadow selves is like, I think one of the most empowering things we can do. Also, why it's so painful and why it's so difficult and why we would rather sometimes ignore it. But yeah, I confront my shadow self very head on. If I know there's something boiling underneath the surface, I sit down, I meditate, I journal, I give myself the time I need to really focus on
It froze for a second.
and whenever I'm receiving that invitation, I accept it. So yeah, that's kind of my how I face my shadow self. I'm so curious to hear your answer.
Yeah, I think it's similar, except I wouldn't say I don't know if I feel like I face it super headstrong on. I think I had to learn that and force myself to get out of my comfort zone because normally it's like run, 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 as fast as you can. But especially this year, and since I've started my podcast, I've tried to like force myself out of my comfort zone and to face those things that come across as fear because fear isn't really real or the things
Mm,
that I feel like are holding me back. But I do like to face my shadow side alone. Like I find
yeah.
myself really going into hermit mode a lot because I feel like I always want to grow and overcome the things that are holding me back because I used to strive for perfection, but perfection isn't really real. You have to face those ugly parts
Mm,
of yourself to really, I guess, have more of a perfect feeling or fulfilling feeling, I guess, if that makes
mm-hmm.
sense.
Oh, I love that. I think that's so real. I think yeah, shadow work is getting outside of your comfort zone. It's getting uncomfortable. And I think our immediate impulse when something like that comes up is to maybe run away or to ignore it and hope it goes away on its own. And, sometimes that calling will get louder and louder until we do actually face it. So
Yeah.
it is good being in the practice of listening to your intuition and like not letting it get to the point where like it like continues to grow and you're ignoring it, right? Like catching it kind of like when it first initially starts and you're like, okay, like there's something here, maybe that's worth sitting with or meditating on or whatever.
Yeah, definitely. You froze for a second, but I'm not sure if you can still hear
Oh,
me.
you froze there for a second.
Oh, okay, we both froze at the same time.
Oh.
It was
There
only
we
a
are.
couple seconds, but I wanted to finish up kind of what you were saying by it allows for growth. Facing your shadow side allows for growth. And I think that we're on this planet for way too long to sit here and stay the same. And I think it does us a disservice. So I
I
guess,
agree.
shadow side can take.
It's It's so important. Yes, yes. That was a great first question.
Yeah, it was. Okay, so now let's tell us about who you are and what you want the audience and the world to know about you and what you represent.
Wow, what a question. Um, I mean, I think on one hand, the way that I want to be known first and foremost is as a creative artist. You can see all my paintings in the background. I paint, I write, I'm an indie author. I self-published my first book 2 years ago, and it's also like a hybrid memoir of poetry and prose, all about kind of overcoming all forms of like domestic violence, abuse, and kind of coming into your own, light and healing. And I guess that's also why I ruthlessly pursue shadow work, because I know that there's, it's, uh, I don't want to use this word exactly, but like you are kind of rewarded for surrendering, I feel. And a big part of, I think, shadow work too is like just surrendering. So a lot of my work consists of that. So I'm a creative artist, I'm a writer, I'm a spiritualist, and I guess I just kind of hope to use like my own unique experiences and perspective and work to help guide people. And
I think she'll be back
I
soon.
kind of believe it's important to take from everywhere. I don't really have like a one path works or like one method works sort of mindset. I feel like there are as many paths as there are people on this planet. It's like a fingerprint, and
Yeah.
I hope to use that in my work, that like, everyone has their own path and their own healing journey. And what worked for me might not work for you, but like by sharing together, we can kind of find solace and refuge and maybe even like the validation and love that we need to get through.
Yeah, I love that. So I feel like I was going to start off the conversation with more astrology, but I feel like we're supposed to go into the deeper stuff right now, and we'll touch on astrology later.
I'm here for it. I'm here. Wherever this leads us, I'm game.
Yes, thank you. I love that. Because I'm definitely a go with the flow type of girl. So,
Me
um,
too.
you mentioned your book. So let's talk about the Kill Manual and what that is for you.
Yeah. So the Kill Manual was such a wonderful healing, like, medicine for me. And I guess like I use the word medicine because it really was sour and bitter, and it was hard to get through, and it was hard to swallow a lot of it. But I wrote it for myself. I wrote it because I needed to. I wrote it because I come from a pretty difficult and challenging like background, and my family situation was really poor, and that led me down a very uniquely dark path, I would say. And I think I wanted to take all of that, and I knew that all of this was, I was alone through a lot of that in my life. And by writing the book, I felt like it might be a way for me to bridge the gap to other people. Um, like my mom was mentally ill. So growing up in our home, like in the 90s, like 2000s, like that was way before the mental health movement started. And, my book touches on mental health issues, it touches on depression, it touches on suicide, but also how I've learned to kind of like heal and cope with and overcome some of these things, if not all of them, honestly. So yeah, like the Kill Manual kind of just represented this like ball of pain that I needed to do something with, and it felt very lonely to carry. And one of the things that always made me feel less alone in the world was like reading books. Like you pick up a book and you feel like the author is like speaking to you, and suddenly you feel like, man, I'm not the only one who thinks this way. Like, I'm not alone. And I wanted to maybe give that to anyone else who ever went through what I did. And I've had so many people over the years reach out to me about how the book has touched them and helped them, especially because the book speaks a lot about like the mother wound, and how that affected and impacted my journey and how I had to overcome that. And I always felt like I was the only one ever who had like a mother wound. You know, so many people growing up, I feel, you know, my friends and family, other family members, like could never relate to having a traumatic relationship with your mom. You know, mom is usually the one who holds things down. She's the nurturer. She's the lover. You know, like mom has her stuff together, at least for the most part. And for me, that just like was never people yeah, just like reach out to me and tell me that like the book has really helped them with like healing their own mother wounds. So yeah, that it's kind of, I don't really know where to end that question. It's like
No, I mean, I think it's great because a part of the reason why I asked you to be on this on my podcast is because I felt like we had similar energies, and I saw that you posted before that. What did you say? You said that you share to help heal, and we empower by listening. And I think that that's so powerful because oftentimes we feel like we go through things alone. Although we have different journeys, I say this all the time, we have different journeys, but we have the same emotions and, same destinations that we're trying to achieve. I don't have a traumatic relationship with my mom, but I did have a traumatic relationship that triggered and snowballed into where I am today, which was,
right. Mm-hmm.
a painful, dark journey where I felt lonely. And now I'm here wanting to share. So those other people who may resonate in some way, shape, or form with the emotions, not necessarily the actual situation, can
Yes.
can feel like they're not alone and grow and see that there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Oh my god, I love that. Yes. Yeah.
So I'm glad that we connected.
Yeah,
Um,
me too. Me too.
yeah. So in your book, I did not purchase your book yet. However, I do plan on it because I want to read it. But I've been reading some of the things that you post on your story. I screenshot it, so I might be missing a couple words, but it said, when we hear the word abuse, we paint pictures of bruised faces, moonlit eyes, and cherry lips. But I still cannot salvage the nuclear damage radiating from his words. I never understood how someone could beat me down without touching me at all, how a person could break my heart without breaking any skin, how a man could ruin me without leaving any scars. Most day my face wasn't bruised, my heart was. And I thought it was so, I don't know, I really loved it because oftentimes we think abuse is just like you said, physically hurting someone, but it's much deeper than that. And it's much easier to abuse people with your words.
Yeah.
People think.
I think the most painful wounds are the ones that we don't wear on our skin, you know? And maybe that sounds cliche, but it's so true. And, you know, when I wrote that, it was like also why I think growing up, no one thought that I was in an abusive home because my mom and, you know, like her issues never, my mom and her issues never ever led her to put her hands on me, and she didn't have to for her to cause so much pain. And I feel that that's kind of, and that was the relationship between both her and my dad, was, you know, they kind of used words, and that cut so deep. And as a child, I feel like we don't have the language to describe why that is, why it cuts so deep. And you're like, man, they're not even hitting me, you know, like they're not even putting their hands on me. And because I know what that feels like too, right? Like I know what it's like to get smacked down. But you know, on the end of that poem, it's like, you know, when my stepfather told me that like he didn't love me, I almost wished he had just hit me instead, because the words hit so hard. And I think that
Oh man.
black and blue eye, right?
Wait,
Like you show up to
wait,
school, like
I'm sorry, can you hear? You froze for a second, and I feel like you froze at like a really important time. So you said at the end of
oh
that poem,
no,
yeah, you said at the end of
no,
that poem, you wish that instead of your father saying that he would have hit you because why?
because it was the end of the poem says you know, and on most days my face wasn't bruised, my heart was. And when my stepfather told me he didn't love me, I wish he would have just hit me instead. And I feel like, again, it just kind of shows like how words cut so much deeper than physical pain or being smacked or being hit. Like that stuff heals. Like you get a cut on your arm, it'll be gone in a week. Like you get a black eye, it'll be gone in a week or so. But those words stay with you for your whole life. And that is so much more of a mortal wound, I feel, than anything else. Because I've been hit, I've been beat, I've been smacked down. Nothing has hurt as bad in my life as the words that like have been uttered to me either by my parents or by other abusers or by friends, like whoever and whatever. Like those are the things that stay in my head.
What is happening?
So
Sorry. Hold on.
oh, it's okay.
I don't know even how to get to that, so we're gonna ignore that. I'm sorry.
No problem.
My mom.
No
I have
worries.
my phone on Do Not Disturb. Okay, hopefully she doesn't call back. Sorry. Go ahead.
No problem. No, yeah, I mean, I just think, I guess because emotional wounds aren't readily seen and happening, and especially as a child, if you're not coming to school with like a black and blue eye, no one suspects a thing. And I think that's part of why for my childhood and my adolescence in general, like no one ever really suspected a thing. And I would tell them what was happening at home, and you don't really have any proof. Like, how do you prove that? There's no black and blue eye, there's no cuts on the forehead, and it's not the typical signs of abuse. And I feel that's more so what I endured, where again, like my mom was mentally ill, and that would force her to say a lot of really mean things if she was having an episode. And as a child, again, like we don't really understand why or how that's happening. It's just you know it's like crazy to us. I feel like as kids we just don't understand. And if you don't have like the bruises, I guess, to kind of match what's going on in the home, like no one really bats an eye. But I guess like all of this is a complicated way of saying emotional abuse is very serious too, and verbal abuse is very serious. And just because they don't leave us with like very visible scars, very visible wounds, doesn't mean that it's not happening, and doesn't mean that it's not a threat to someone's safety, or a threat to someone's image of self, or a threat to someone's maybe, yeah, just like overall feelings. Yeah, those are also very serious forms of abuse.
Yeah, and I think you touched on some really great things. And so a couple of things like that went off in my head is as a kid, or adults don't even know how to communicate a lot of times. So as a kid, if you're told something that's hurtful to you and you're not explained why or apologized to, you're going to think that that's
Oh,
okay.
oh, you froze and you just came back
Oh
in.
no. Okay. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Yeah, you're good. You said the last thing I caught was like adults also don't
Oh,
always know how to communicate their feelings or their
yeah.
words.
Adults don't always know how to communicate. So it makes it hard for them to communicate to the child or even apologize or explain why they said what they said or realize what it was wrong. So as a child or someone who is hurt, you don't necessarily know how to differentiate that from the truth and what's not the truth. You just know it feels so real. And so
Yes.
I think that's important to know because a lot of the times those hurtful words come from people that mean the world to you and you expect
Yeah.
so much of and so much from, and then they say something super hurtful and you're like, well, man, maybe,
Yeah, you're like, well, damn.
yeah.
That's always how I felt as a kid. Like, those things, I think it would always make me angrier than it would hurt me, because I think on one hand, I knew a part of, for I guess I'm speaking specifically on behalf of like the relationship I have with my parents. But like when they would say those things to me, I was like, you're my mom and dad. Like, why are you being so nasty and hostile? Like, it would really make me angry. Like, I know you don't believe that because you were in my room last night cuddling me, telling me you love me. And now today you're telling me, you know, this, and this. So I really think it's also like the emotional abuse and the verbal abuse can really mess with your head too, in the same way that physical abuse can. And again, like minute someone's telling you one thing and then the next minute they're telling you something else. And as a child, when you really don't have any like understanding of reality or the world, and you're relying on your parents to guide you and to give you this guidance, like, and they're telling you all these different things, like it just becomes, I think, so confusing. I found myself being like more angered by that, you know, than anything.
Yeah.
So
I would agree with that. So my perspective is from a toxic relationship that I was in versus like
mm,
family. Um, and I can definitely relate to that because in that instance, I'm with someone because I'm planning longevity, planning on marrying you, like I'm your ride or die, I'll do whatever. And I'm anticipating to get that back because to me that's what love is. But if in one day you're like super nice, let's go do this, you're cuddly or whatever, and then the next minute you're telling me that I'm trash and you're like yelling at me and telling me I can't do anything right, like day after day after day, that gets confusing. And then,
yeah,
you
yes.
know, I didn't realize it when I was in it, but now that I've done research on it and know more about it, like that's gaslighting, that's manipulation, that's narcissism, that's all these things that were like, no, 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 red flags. But you don't know what you don't know.
No, no. And that's the thing too, right? Like when we're going like that's how we learn, right? That's how we learn what these things are, is unfortunately, I think, by experiencing them firsthand. And unless you're a psychologist or a therapist and have learned about these things like in a classroom setting, I would say most people who are familiar with these things have experienced them themselves, you
Yeah.
know, unfortunately. And it's really, you know,
Mm.
all like it hitting from all angles, right? Like especially when it's a romantic partner, like in your case, those words, like are you familiar with words of affirmation, like the love language?
Yes.
Yeah, like that's like the opposite end of words of affirmation. That's like using words to like harm, and using words to confuse and to offend and take down and to cause pain. And I feel, especially when you're in a romantic relationship and you're like, oh, we're partners, we're a team, we're supposed to like work together, we love each other.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden this person switches up, you're like, man, am I the crazy one? Like, am
Yeah,
I
what
not
did I
seeing this
do?
clearly?
And it does,
Yeah,
it
you're
makes
like,
you
oh my
feel
God.
crazy. I
Yeah.
felt like I was losing my mind. I mean, I've stayed in that relationship for several years, almost 8 years, and like by the end of it, I like was insane. I felt like I was insane. Where,
Yeah. Yeah. And
yeah,
I think that that's part of it too. You know, I think that that is part of like what gaslighting and the like verbal and emotional abuse does, is it really makes you question yourself, and it makes you question like your actions and if you've been a good partner or a good person, you know. And it really is just like a pain cycle. Like the one party is upset, they take it out on the other party eats it. And you know, I feel like I don't know if this is going to lead us down another like
we'll
you know,
go with it.
conversation. Okay. Okay. But I do feel that for a long time, like I'm going to switch perspectives here, and I'm going to be talking less about like my family experiences and more just to like meet you on the romantic plane, you know. But in partner, like in interpersonal relationships with other people, like especially our intimate and romantic partners,
Always a good time.
person is really upset, they take it on the other person, and you staying makes you actually complicit in that cycle. And that doesn't make it your fault either, by the way, right? This is not like a blame thing. And I'm also speaking this, talking to myself too,
Yeah.
but it's like not even that it was it's not a blame thing. It's like sometimes we also lack the understanding of what's going on, or we lack maybe like the self-love or the self-respect, or maybe the standards of like how relationships should actually be to us was never like clearly communicated as children or as like young women. And so we don't really know what to expect, or we don't really know what is healthy, what isn't healthy, what is, what does love look like, you
Right.
know? And that doesn't mean that, again, that it's your fault for staying in a relationship that like maybe wasn't serving you or was harmful to you. It's just to say that like you are also complicit in that due to your personal, relationship with life, with yourself, with pain, with trauma. Like it really is like a cycle.
Yeah.
And I guess the most empowering thing I realized was that like I was also complicit in those relationships, and it was not a blame thing. It wasn't
Yeah.
like shaming myself or saying that like, well, I was stupid or I didn't know better or blah blah blah. It's like, how could I have?
Yeah.
How could I have known better?
Yeah. I think that's a really important thing to point out because a lot of times, when you go through a traumatic experience or a relationship, whether it's a friend, romantic, whatever, you begin to question yourself, like, what did I do? How, why am I not good enough? And you start to kind of blame yourself. But I think what I learned is you have to take the ego and the personification, I guess, out of it and
Oh,
just
you just
reflect.
froze right there.
Oh,
I'm so
that's
sorry.
okay. I don't know what's happening, but as long as we're catching back up, um,
Yeah, no, we're
you have
catching
to
back up.
you have to take the ego out of it and realize, yeah, I played a role, but why did it happen? Not because I
Right.
suck or I'm terrible. Maybe I don't fully love myself, but it's because I didn't know how to love myself. It's like I can't do the things that I didn't know. And
Yeah.
I learned this through this experience, and so now I'm a better person for it. So
Mm,
I think that's a major key. And also not becoming bitter after that experience. You have to take
yeah.
you have to take it into something positive and make, learn something and grow from it rather than just, that was shitty and I'm going to be mad the rest of my life because how
I'm
does
just
that
gonna
serve
spend time jaded and
me?
giving up on love. It's not for me.
Yeah.
Why do I attract such bad people all the time?
Yeah.
I'm never gonna try again. Yeah, I love that. Not staying, and I think that like approaching the situation at hand, whether against intimate relationship or platonic relationship, familial, and just kind of not attributing blame to yourself or the other party, which I think can be really hard for most people. That comes up a lot in my readings when I'm talking to clients about like it. It might be hard to hold space or compassion for the perpetrator, in our eyes, but it really does help remove blame. And blame, when we do attribute blame to the situation, to ourselves, to the perpetrator, it really does build resentment, and it builds those feelings of bitterness, and it builds those feelings of distrust in other people. And that can prevent you from finding better relationships,
Yeah.
which, and yes, that means that we have to, along the way, like meet a bunch of people who might not fit that, you know.
Yeah.
But it does mean, I feel like as we continue to go, we get a little closer to the people who do eventually like represent our most authentic selves, or our most like, authentic like connections.
Yeah, absolutely. I think being bitter just holds so much negative space and like it holds you back from growing and ever being fulfilled. And it's just like we're here too long to be angry. And I think that
Yes. Yeah.
we have to realize that when it comes to our parents, our loved ones, or whoever, I think that unless they truly just are a shitty person, like with the intent to hurt you, everyone is doing the best that they can, the best they know how to
Yeah.
do. Everyone is working through their own shadows that they may not even realize that they have. And so,
Oof.
yeah, that shitty thing happened, but like you said, try to show some compassion and take the blame out of it, and it come from more of a understanding place rather than
Mhm.
a blame and resentful place, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. The only last thing I want to add, because you just brought this up in my mind, as you were just saying that, is that like, I think oh my God, wait, I just lost it.
It's okay.
I just had it. Or it was about removing blame and, oh yeah, like how people don't really know that they actually are carrying around that shadow. I love that. That was so powerful. Yeah. Like some people are carrying around that pain and they don't.
Damn it.
You don't have, like,
Wait,
having
wait.
compassion.
You said some people are carrying around that pain and they don't, and then it froze.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Some people are carrying around that pain and they don't even realize it. That's what you said.
Yeah.
And I love that. Like their shadow selves and they don't realize they are carrying that with them, and that might be where all those like triggers come from, their pain and their malice that they might take out on other people, their hurt. That shadow is like calling for them to look at it and to work with it and to put some love into it. I feel like shadow work has a lot to do with like exercising love in places where we otherwise wouldn't feel love belongs.
Yes.
So I feel the one thing I always like to tell people about this, like removing the blame, removing bitterness, like, is that it's not for the other party, although they benefit from that, it is more for you and it's more for yourself. So even if you can't like do the bodhisattva thing and like come all the way out of yourself and say like, I forgive all people, anyone who's ever hurt me, like, you don't have to do that. At least just focus on it for yourself,
Yeah.
like it is going to be something that helps you,
Yeah.
So if you're gonna, like, it doesn't have to be like, oh, well, I'm doing this, or I can't forgive that person. I can't, excuse that person. It's like, no, it's not about that,
Yeah.
maybe that person actually, doesn't deserve to be forgiven by you, but it's not about them. It is about you, and holding on to that resentment or pain is going to cause you so much more harm over the years, right? Because these things build, so it is literally going to be something you carry for a very long time that might not be worth carrying, so at least do it for yourself, right? Like, or there we go. Okay.
Oh.
Here we are. I just turned you over. I had to plug you in. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. That's all
I
right.
hope that didn't change the orientation too much.
No, I can see you bigger now. It's fine.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. So you mentioned your readings, so maybe we'll transition a little bit, and if we come back to more like healing stuff, we can, because whatever. But how did you get into divination? And okay, it was about to be a loaded question, so I'm going to give you one question. How did you get into divination?
That's such an interesting question too, because like, I mean, my mom had a host of like mental health issues, but I think the thing that made that a very unique experience is that like she was also a clairvoyant. She was a medium. It was scary. She was insanely good and would use it to freak all my friends out. And so she was born with the gift. I've heard stories from my dad who kind of talked about my grandma, her calling my mom like, you're pregnant. I know you're pregnant, and just, just weird things like that. And my dad, he's really not into any of this stuff. And so for him to kind of say like, yeah, babcia, which is Polish for grandma, like, yeah, babcia called your mom before we even knew she was pregnant and told her she was pregnant, and we went to the doctor shortly after that because we kind of got nervous. She was right. And so, my grandma, I feel, had gifts for her, because oftentimes she was very perceptive to things that normal ordinary people wouldn't be. And then differentiating that between like what was real versus what wasn't real, what was like a maybe hallucination versus something that wasn't, right? Like one of my favorite stories, I'm going to say the story because I think it's worth sharing, but, and then I'm going to bring it all back. But one of my earliest experiences with my mom was, because again, me and her weren't very close. So it was very rarely that like I found any comfort in her like being there. So me and my sister shared a room when we were little, and she's like 2 years younger than me, so we're very close in age. And it was like at nighttime, and so my sister also had gifts of many kinds. There's a little girl, and she would sometimes tell me like, oh my God, there's something in her room. Like, don't freak out. Just like there's something here, just come sleep in my bed tonight. And I'd be like, okay. So, I go into her bed trying not to freak out, right? Because this is before I can see anything. I don't know what's going on. And so I was like, well, what is it? And she says, it's a little boy. And it was like 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, like really, really late. We woke up and she woke me up. And I was like, well, what do you mean it's a little boy? And she was like, I don't know, but it's a little boy. And I was like, okay, well, tell him to go away. Like, I don't want him here. But she said, he wasn't going, and that he was very, like, he could see us and he wanted to be close to us. But she said she was very forward with like, it's not bad, but it's weird. So I don't want him here. And so she was like, I think we should call mom. And she's like, no, we have to call mom. So my mom, we call my mom and she wakes up. She's like sleepy. She kind of comes in. She sits down on the bed. She's like, what is it? What's wrong? And my sister's like, there's a ghost in her room. And my mom goes, oh, is it the little boy? And I was like, and it just freaked me out. I could not believe it. And my sister looked at me and I was like, oh my God, like they both saw the same thing. And
Yeah.
without even, my mom or Alex, my sister, saying what she had seen, she just said it was a ghost. And my mom confirmed, like, oh yeah, the little boy that was here. She's like, he's gone now. It's okay. Go back to bed. So I kind of like, as far as how did I get into divination, it's kind of just been my whole life,
Yeah.
and I feel that, in divination, the form of like channeling and the form of like contacting spirits or deities or whoever, you're trying to work with. I'm very lucky. I think I was just, I grew up in that space. I was kind of a late bloomer. I didn't want these gifts at first because I knew how serious they were. And I knew that it's a lifestyle change. And I knew that you have to be very dedicated to maintaining good spiritual health and energetic health and keeping your aura light, keeping your aura cleaned, being very careful about who you choose to surround yourself with, where you choose to go, what you choose to listen to or consume. Like, I knew it was always a very big responsibility. So me getting into divination and spiritual work, and like I find now at this point my work kind of is more shamanic. It was just sort of like a
Sorry, guys, bear with me and the technical difficulties.
oh, are we
We're
here?
back. We're back.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, so I don't know. It's kind of hard to answer. I feel like I grew up in the space and I come from a family of witchy women and seers and mediums and clairvoyants, and I was like, that just seems really intense, y'all. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I decided that, there's a lot of instances in my life that led me to finally having to like wake up to the calling and like sit down and really take this stuff seriously, because I did have the gift, and if I chose to ignore it, it was only going to get worse, and I guess worse I mean by like the ways that I was feeling. I didn't know how to ground. I didn't know how to protect my aura or cleanse. And I used to work with families and children. So it was a lot of emotional work. And I would come home feeling just drained and not knowing how to restore or replenish my energy. And so I just realized like, I'm a very sensitive person. I like can really pick up on other people's energies. And if I don't learn how to better work with this, like I'm going to suffer. and I'm going to continue to suffer, and I'm probably going to get sick because a lot of this is so intense that if I don't do something about it and actually like put in the effort, I'm going to hurt myself. So that's kind of my calling. I think I needed to be forced, but I listened eventually. So, and now
Yeah.
we're here.